While I was on a business trip, my parents sold my dream house to pay for my brother's luxury vacation. When I returned, my dad laughed, "Your house paid for their fun." I smirked back. He asked, "What's so funny?" Because the house they sold was never mine. I am Lyra Wilson, 29 years old, and I just returned from the most important business trip of my career to find the locks on my dream house changed. Exhausted and confused after a 14-hour flight from Tokyo, I drove straight to my parents' suburban home in Charlotte, North Carolina, where my younger brother Camden was lounging by the pool, scrolling through photos on his iPhone with a self-satisfied grin. With a smirk spreading across his weathered face, my dad casually announced from his leather recliner, "Your house paid for their fun." The shock hit me like a physical blow, but I only smiled in response. "What's so funny?" he snapped, his confidence suddenly wavering. If you're enjoying this story, please let me know where you're reading from in the comments. Hit that like button and follow my journey of betrayal and unexpected revenge. My name is Lyra Wilson, a 29-year-old financial analyst who has been completely self-sufficient since the age of 18. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Charlotte, I learned early that I would need to forge my own path. While my parents had the financial means to help with my education, they chose to prioritize my younger brother Camden. Their reasoning was always the same: he needs more support than you do. You're naturally gifted. This pattern of favoritism was established long before I could understand its implications. During my high school years, I worked 3 jobs simultaneously to save for college. Mornings at a Starbucks, evenings at an Applebee's, and weekends at Target. My parents praised my work ethic but never offered financial assistance. Meanwhile, Camden received a brand new Jeep Wrangler for his 16th birthday and unlimited spending money that he blew on Xbox games and house parties. Despite the obvious favoritism, I maintained a relationship with my family, holding on to hope that someday they would recognize my achievements with the same enthusiasm they showed for Camden's smallest accomplishments. This hope, I would later realize, was tragically misplaced. Camden, now 24, has never held a steady job. His resume consists of short-lived positions he quit because they were beneath him or too stressful. Every failed attempt at independence was met with understanding and financial support from our parents. They paid his rent when he was fired from Best Buy for chronic tardiness. They covered his credit card debt when he overspent on designer sneakers and craft beer. They even financed his brief attempt at starting a YouTube channel about luxury lifestyle, which he abandoned after posting 3 videos. My brother grew accustomed to having his problems solved by our parents. He never developed the resilience that comes from facing consequences. When his girlfriend of 4 months broke up with him for his immaturity, my parents consoled him as though he had suffered an unimaginable tragedy. After graduating State University with honors, I secured an entry-level position at a prestigious financial firm in Charlotte. While my colleagues complained about student loans, I had none, but only because I had worked myself to exhaustion for 4 years, taking maximum course loads to graduate early and save on tuition. The pride I felt in this accomplishment was dampened when my father commented, "You were lucky to find those jobs. Not everyone has your advantages." For 6 years, I lived in a cramped studio apartment in South End, saving diligently for a down payment on a house. I packed peanut butter sandwiches for lunch every day, limited my social outings to free events, and tracked every dollar I spent with obsessive precision. When I finally had enough saved, I began searching for the perfect home. The house I found was a stunning 2-story colonial revival in the historic Dilworth neighborhood, with towering magnolia trees lining the tree-lined street. Built in the 1940s, it possessed character that modern developments completely lacked. Original hardwood floors throughout, a brick fireplace with hand-carved mantel, and floor-to-ceiling windows that bathed every room in golden natural light. The backyard was spacious, with raised garden beds that reminded me of the vegetable garden my grandmother Rose had lovingly tended. This detail was particularly significant to me. My grandmother had been my sanctuary during childhood. When the favoritism at home became unbearable, I would ride my bike 4 miles to her small house in Noda. She would welcome me with warm chocolate chip cookies and unwavering support. "You are stronger than you know, Lyra," she would say, "and one day that strength will be your greatest asset." The house near her old neighborhood felt like a spiritual connection to her, even though she had passed away 2 years earlier. When I signed the closing papers at the attorney's office, I felt her presence, her approval. This was more than a financial investment, it was a symbol of my independence and resilience. When I invited my family to see my new home, their reactions were predictably dismissive. My mother commented on how much renovation work it would need. My father questioned whether I had overpaid for a money pit. Camden laughed at the vintage kitchen, though he had never cooked a meal beyond microwaving frozen burritos. Must be nice to be so lucky, he said, as though my years of sacrifice and hard work were completely irrelevant. For 3 years, I poured love and effort into that house. I painted each room myself in carefully chosen colors, restored the original hardwood floors to their former glory, and planted heirloom tomatoes and roses in the garden that my grandmother would have absolutely loved. It became my sanctuary, a physical manifestation of my journey to self-sufficiency. Then came the opportunity that could transform my career significantly. A 3-week business trip to Tokyo to negotiate our firm's expansion into Asian markets. My managing director made it crystal clear that this assignment could lead to a senior partnership if handled successfully. The timing couldn't have been worse. The trip would overlap with the blooming of the heirloom rose bushes I had planted in memory of my grandmother. I arranged for a professional landscaping service, but my mother suggested I leave a spare key with them instead. "We'll check on the house while you're gone," she offered sweetly. Against every instinct screaming inside me, I agreed. The day before my departure, Camden called, his voice carrying that familiar tone of dramatic self-pity. His girlfriend of 2 months had broken up with him via text message. "I need to get away," he lamented pathetically. "I need time to heal from this devastating betrayal." He spoke about needing a luxury vacation, perhaps to the Bahamas or Hawaii, something Instagram-worthy to show his ex-girlfriend what she was missing. When I asked how he planned to afford such an extravagant trip on his non-existent savings, he sighed dramatically. "Mom and Dad say they can't help this time. They claim they're saving for retirement or something. It's so unfair." A sense of deep unease crept over me as I handed my house key to my mother that evening. She noticed my obvious hesitation. "Don't worry, sweetheart," she assured me with what seemed like genuine concern. "We'll take excellent care of everything." I should have listened to my instincts. I should have made other arrangements. But family loyalty and the overwhelming pressure of my upcoming business trip clouded my better judgment. I boarded my flight to Tokyo the next morning, completely unaware that I was leaving my dream home vulnerable to the very people who should have protected it above all else. After 3 grueling weeks of presentations, client meetings, and high-stakes negotiations in Tokyo, I was physically and mentally exhausted. The trip had exceeded all expectations. Our firm secured partnerships with 2 major Japanese investment banks, but the constant pressure to perform had taken its toll. All I wanted was to sleep in my own bed, surrounded by the comfort and security I had created. My flight landed at Charlotte Douglas International Airport at 7:45 in the evening. Rain drummed against the taxi windows as we drove through familiar streets toward home. When the driver pulled up to my house, I immediately noticed that the porch light was off, strange, since I had programmed it to automatically turn on at sunset. Dragging my heavy suitcase up the front steps, I inserted my key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. Thinking I might be using the wrong key due to jet lag, I tried my backup. Still nothing. I stepped back and examined the front door more carefully. The entire lock mechanism had been changed. Confusion and alarm washed over me in waves. Had there been a break-in? Had my parents needed to replace the lock for some emergency reason? I rang the doorbell repeatedly, thinking perhaps they were inside house-sitting, but no one answered. The house stood dark, silent, and completely foreign to me. I called my mother's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. My father answered his phone on the 3rd ring, his voice unusually cheerful and upbeat. "Lyra, you're back. How was the trip to Japan?" "Dad, I'm standing at my house and my key doesn't work. Did something happen? Was there an emergency?" A moment of telling silence followed. "Then, you should come over to our place right now. We need to have a serious talk." The ominous tone in his voice sent a chill through my entire body. I returned to the waiting taxi and directed the driver to my parents' suburban home 20 minutes away. As I entered their living room, the scene before me was absolutely surreal. Camden lounged on their leather sectional, scrolling through photos on his phone with a satisfied, almost smug expression. My mother busied herself in the kitchen, carefully avoiding any eye contact. My father sat in his recliner watching a Panthers game with casual interest, as if nothing unusual had happened. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice strained with exhaustion and growing panic. "Why was my lock changed?" Camden looked up from his phone, his expression insufferably smug. "Check these out," he said, turning his screen toward me. The photos showed him lounging on a pristine white sand beach, sipping colorful cocktails by an infinity pool, and posing in front of an overwater villa. Bahamas, baby. 5-star resort all the way. Private beach, unlimited spa treatments, personal butler service. I stared at the images in complete confusion. How did you afford this? I thought Mom and Dad said they couldn't help financially. My father muted the television and leaned forward in his chair. "We found another solution," he said matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "We sold your house." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt my knees weaken and gripped the back of a chair for support. "You what?" "We sold your house," he repeated, more firmly this time. "Got an excellent price too. All-cash offer, closed in 8 days." My mother finally emerged from the kitchen, wringing her hands nervously. "Camden really needed this trip, Lyra. He was absolutely devastated after Brittany broke up with him. You know how sensitive he is." I struggled to process what I was hearing. "You sold my house without my permission. That's illegal. How did you even manage to do that?" My father waved dismissively, as if swatting away an annoying fly. "We had your key. We had access to your important paperwork in your home office. The rest was just paperwork and details." "Details?" I echoed, my voice rising with incredulity. "You mean fraud?" Camden interjected, showing absolutely no remorse whatsoever. "The resort was incredible, Lyra. Private cabana, unlimited room service, underwater restaurant with shark viewing. I really needed this after everything I've been through. You have no idea how difficult my breakup was." Rage and disbelief battled within me, but I forced myself to remain outwardly calm. Something deeper was stirring, a cold, calculating fury that demanded strategic thinking, not emotional reactions. "So you committed fraud, sold my house without my knowledge or consent, and used the proceeds to fund a luxury vacation," I said slowly, my voice eerily steady. My mother's expression turned defensive. "Not all of it went to the vacation, Lyra. We needed a new car too. That old Honda was falling apart. And Camden deserved something nice after everything he's been through." "Everything he's been through?" I echoed incredulously. "A 2-month relationship ending justifies stealing my house? The house I worked 3 jobs to save for? The house I spent years renovating with my own hands?" My father's face hardened, his mask of casual indifference finally slipping. "Don't be so dramatic and ungrateful. You can always buy another house. You're doing well at your job, making good money. Besides, we're your parents. We know what's best for this family." "What's best?" I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "You think stealing from your daughter is what's best?" "We didn't steal anything," my father said firmly, his voice taking on an authoritative tone. "We redistributed family resources to where they were needed most urgently. Camden needed healing and recovery. You were getting too attached to that house anyway, it was just bricks and mortar." "Too attached? It was my house. My home." My father leaned back in his chair, a cruel smirk forming on his lips. "Well, not anymore." He gestured toward Camden, who was still absorbed in his vacation photos. "Your house paid for their fun." In that pivotal moment, something fundamental inside me shifted. The shock and anger gave way to an eerie, almost supernatural calm. I felt the corners of my mouth turn upward into a smile that felt foreign on my face. My father's confident smirk faltered noticeably. "What's so funny?" he snapped, clearly unnerved by my unexpected reaction. I maintained my mysterious smile but said absolutely nothing. Instead, I picked up my suitcase and headed toward the front door with deliberate, measured steps. "Where are you going?" my mother called after me, panic creeping into her voice. "To make some very important phone calls," I replied, my voice steady as steel. "Enjoy your evening, everyone." As I closed the door behind me, I could hear Camden asking with typical cluelessness, "What's her problem? She can just buy another house, right?" Little did they know that their actions had set in motion a series of events that would change our family forever, and not in any way they could possibly imagine. I drove through the rain-soaked Charlotte streets, tears blurring my vision until I reached the apartment complex where my best friend Brooklyn lived. Since college, Brooklyn had been my rock, the sister I never had but desperately needed. Her lights were on despite the late hour, and she answered my frantic knocking in pajamas, her face immediately shifting from sleepy confusion to deep concern. "Lyra, what happened?" She pulled me inside, taking my rain-drenched coat. I collapsed onto her sectional couch, the enormous weight of the situation finally breaking through my shock. Between sobs, I explained what my family had done. Brooklyn listened intently, her expression morphing from disbelief to pure outrage. "They sold your house without your consent for a vacation?" Her voice rose with each word. "That's not just immoral, Lyra. That's criminal. We need to call the police right now." I took a deep breath, regaining some composure. "There's something else, Brooklyn. Something about the house that they don't know." Brooklyn sat beside me, her brow furrowed with concern. "What do you mean?" My mind drifted back to my grandmother Rose, the one person in my family who had truly seen and valued me. While my parents lavished attention and resources on Camden, Grandma Rose had invested in me, not with money, but with unwavering belief in my potential. "Do you remember my grandmother?" I asked softly. Brooklyn nodded immediately. "Of course. She was wonderful. Always had fresh cookies when we visited during high school, and she never failed to ask about my art projects." "She was the only one who ever put me first," I said quietly, "the only one who saw how differently my parents treated me compared to Camden." What few people knew was that before her death, Grandma Rose had established a private trust with me as the sole beneficiary. She had been extremely careful to keep this arrangement secret from my father, her son, who had previously borrowed substantial sums from her that were never repaid. "The house," I explained to Brooklyn, "isn't technically mine, at least not in the way they think. I'm the listed owner, yes, but I'm actually the trustee of my grandmother's estate. The house was purchased through a trust she established before she died." Brooklyn looked confused. "So the house belongs to a trust, not directly to you?" I nodded. "Exactly. Grandma knew how my father operated. She knew he had taken financial advantage of her repeatedly in the past. So she created an ironclad trust with very specific conditions. The primary one being that if any family member attempted to misappropriate trust assets, they would immediately and permanently forfeit all inheritance rights." Brooklyn's eyes widened with understanding. "So by selling your house, they violated the terms of the trust?" I confirmed with a grim nod. "And there's more. I suspected something like this might happen eventually. My father had been asking too many probing questions about the house's current value before I left for Japan. Camden had been way too interested in how much equity I had built up." "What did you do?" Brooklyn asked, leaning forward. "I installed hidden security cameras before I left for Tokyo. Professional-grade ones connected to cloud storage. I have video evidence of them entering my house, going through my private papers, meeting with real estate agents, and forging my signature on legal documents." Brooklyn stared at me in amazement. "You knew they would try something like this?" I sighed heavily. I hoped they wouldn't. But living with them for 18 years taught me to prepare for the absolute worst. My grandmother taught me that too, in her own subtle way. She always said trust should be earned and proven, not automatically given, even to family members. The next morning, Brooklyn and I met with my grandmother's attorney, Mr. Davidson, who had administered the Rose Wilson Trust for over 2 decades. His silver hair and piercing gray eyes commanded respect, and when I explained the situation, his expression grew increasingly grave. "This sale is completely invalid," he assured me. "As trustee, you're the only person legally authorized to sell trust assets. Any transfer without your legitimate signature constitutes fraud." The legal wheels began turning immediately. The police investigation moved swiftly due to the overwhelming video evidence and clear documentation. My father initially hired an expensive criminal defense attorney using the remaining house sale funds, but his defense strategy crumbled when the attorney reviewed the evidence and strongly advised accepting a plea deal. 3 weeks after our confrontation, my father accepted a plea agreement, 2 years probation for fraud and forgery, substantial restitution payments, and 600 hours of community service. My mother, who had physically forged the signatures, received similar terms with slightly less community service. Camden, while not directly involved in the forgery, was charged as an accessory and with receiving stolen property. He received 18 months probation and was ordered to repay the entire cost of his Bahamas vacation, nearly $45,000. The process to reclaim my house moved in parallel. Mr. Davidson worked tirelessly with the title company and the innocent buyers to unwind the fraudulent sale. The buyers, though disappointed, were understanding and cooperative once they realized they had unknowingly participated in a fraud. But the most devastating revelation was yet to come. During our meeting, Mr. Davidson revealed the full extent of my grandmother's estate. "Your grandmother was remarkably shrewd with her investments," he explained. "The house represented only a portion of the trust assets. There were additional funds scheduled for distribution, $180,000 each designated for your parents and brother, provided they respected the trust terms." My heart sank. "So they've lost their inheritance too?" "I'm afraid so," Mr. Davidson confirmed. "By their actions, they triggered the forfeiture clause. Your grandmother experienced similar entitled behavior from your father during her lifetime. She anticipated something like this might happen." 6 months after returning from Tokyo, I finally regained legal possession of my house. Walking through the front door for the first time since the betrayal felt surreal. The physical space was unchanged, but the emotional landscape had been permanently altered. My family's financial collapse was swift and devastating. The restitution payments consumed their savings, legal fees depleted what remained from a house sale, and they were forced to sell their own home, moving to a cramped apartment across town. Camden's collapse was perhaps most dramatic. Ordered to repay $45,000, he found himself facing harsh financial reality for the first time in his life. He eventually took a job at a local car wash, working long hours for minimum wage plus tips. I received desperate text messages from my mother over the following months. First apologies describing their remorse and hardships, then requests to meet about restoring their inheritance rights. The true motivation became clear: it was about money, not reconciliation. But I had learned the most important lesson of all. Family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by consistent actions demonstrating respect, support, and genuine care. The people who proved themselves to be my true family were those who celebrated my successes without jealousy, supported me through challenges without judgment, and loved me without conditions. 2 years later, as I sat in my reclaimed garden watching fireflies illuminate the evening sky, I opened my grandmother's journal, a treasure I discovered among her papers. Her words, written decades earlier, seemed written for this exact moment. "Love should never require the diminishment of self. True family lifts you higher, sees your light, and helps it shine brighter. Those who would dim your light to make theirs seem more special are not acting from love, regardless of what they claim. Remember, Lyra, you always have the right to step away from shadows and into sunshine." The house my family tried to steal had become more truly mine than ever before. Sometimes the greatest gift in betrayal is the clarity it brings, revealing what was true all along beneath polite fictions and expected roles. Sometimes the most profound healing comes not from forgetting pain, but from using it as a foundation to build something beautiful and authentic. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who crossed unforgivable lines? How did you handle the difficult balance between family obligation and self-respect? I'd love to hear your stories and perspectives. Remember, standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's absolutely necessary. Thank you for following my journey, and remember that sometimes the family we create through choice is more nurturing than the one we're given by chance.